Some people have called the Métis story a hidden history. Why is that?
Very good. So, after, to be quite honest, like Canada had an approach, which was to, in many ways, ignore Indigenous people as much as possible, right? And to make sure there were as few of us as possible, both through some very problematic historical happenings, such as residential schools and other things like that, that were in many ways meant to ensure that we weren't here physically, right? But also administratively, when they created the Indian Act and they started to then remove people from who is considered an Indian, right? The federal government and the provinces basically both refused to take any responsibility for Métis people and recognizing any responsibility to our communities whatsoever. And so our people, in many circumstances, had to pretend to be somebody else in order to get any sort of assistance. So they had to either pretend to be to just be French, or pretend to be Ojibwe and get onto one of the treaty lists, right? Or to pretend to be Cree or whatever, right? Or and not pretend, but to identify with those other identities, right? And so for a long time, our stories, and then like after the resistance in 1885, being Métis was very unpopular, right? And there are quotes from the historical record referring to Métis people because of the intense racism in Canada. Like, let's not kid ourselves, right? That this Canada has a very problematic past, right? And we were referred to as being too French, too Catholic, and too Indian, right? And in the Orange Lodge, Ontario, right, run by very anti-Catholic Protestants who had no love for Aboriginal people, it was often safer just to not say anything, just to not talk about who we were, right? And then it became easier for Canada to ignore our story, to ignore our rights and those sorts of things. We've turned that around now. We are working to make sure we are no longer forgotten.